What to do if your training sucked. We see you. We know you're out there. Hey everyone, welcome back to Coach Quip. I'm Coach Robyn.
I'm Coach Chris.
And this is episode 205.
All right, so what do you do if you signed up for a marathon or a half marathon or an Ironman race and you're a month or so out and you realize my training really hasn't been going very well?
It happens a lot. I think you just have to be really real for yourself in the moment. I always call this the come to Jesus moment. And I've had this with my own athletes of like, listen, this is numerically, we only have a couple options here, right? Mm-hmm. So in this episode, we are going to break down how to salvage your training if you've fallen off or, call it.
Yeah, to be clear, what we're talking about here is not like if you're having self-doubt, you've been following your plan and you're having self-doubt, like, have I done enough? This is not what we're talking about here. We are talking about like missing sessions, missing long runs, having like 50-50, or worse, done and not done workouts, right? We're talking about if you have totally fallen off and you find yourself like freaking out because you can see race day coming up on your calendar, those are the folks that we're talking to for this episode.
I will say too, you gave distances at the top of this episode talking about marathon, half Ironman. These are the distances that we cannot bullshit. Sorry, do I get an E for one?
Yeah, okay. You might. I'll say it again.
Okay. We've got my back. But it's true. I mean, you can kind of bullshit. I'll do it. Yep. Your way through a half marathon. You can, it's not that it's going to be your best, mm-hmm. but you can actually conquer the distance and not do damage. Yep. But there is an endurance tipping point that if you don't do the work, you are in danger of not being able to complete it or completing it and hurting yourself. So if you are worried that is you, this episode is for you. Tune in.
Yeah. So first up, we have been saying this a lot in our last couple of episodes, but this is kind of my new favorite catchphrase that we have here. You cannot cram for a race, especially a marathon or a race of a longer distance. You cannot cram for this test, right? So fitness is cumulative. It stacks over many, many weeks and months. And so if you find yourself with a short runway, you have to be realistic. You cannot cram for that event and think that you're going to have the fitness that you would have had if you had the training block that you were supposed to. It takes also 2 to 3 weeks for your training to actualize as fitness in your body, which is why we have a taper period. So cramming all the way up until race day is not going to be beneficial for the day of that event.
Yeah, there are no shortcuts. Short stuff, 5K, 10K stuff, you can kind of get away with doing a shorter runway. Long mm-hmm. stuff, that adaptation period, because it's aerobic, heavily aerobic, is going to just take many weeks. So another reason why at this stage you can't cram.
And it also sets you up for injury. Like your injury risk, if you try to cram before a race, is exponentially higher. So again, no cramming for the race.
All right, number 2, you shouldn't try to make up missed training sessions or do add-ons, right? Jumping your mileage when you're trying to, make up or cram, to say that one again, you're just a lot more likely, like Coach Chris said, to lead to injury. You're also not as likely to be able to use the fitness. So like you might put in X, but you're not getting out Y like you would with a traditional runway. A good training plan is progressive. You step up your work based on what you've done. 2 weeks at 10% build, 1 week at 25% cut, pick back up 2 more weeks, right? That is what we know trained overload is how we stack aerobic fitness, or any type of fitness, but truly aerobic fitness if we're looking at those longer distances. If you've missed several long runs or key sessions, you should just go to the next appropriate step. So say your last long run, or the peak long run that you did was 12 miles, right? You're going to get a lot more benefit doing 14 miles than you would trying to get 18 to 20 in. You need to put your ego aside.
Yeah.
Like full stop on this. Like you are not going to be able to execute 18 to 20 well if you've only done 12 before.
So yeah, we're going to talk about the ego in a minute, but that's a really good point and rolls right into our next one of start from where you are and aim for consistency. So even if you've never hit 16, 18, 20 miles in your marathon build, you will be better off by aiming for consistent shorter runs with the time that you have left. Yeah. That's going to give you a better shot of gaining that aerobic fitness, because the damage that could be done in jumping your mileage, like 50% in a week is going to be, potentially catastrophic for your race. But also, you won't be able to absorb that. And, what's the benefit of of doing 18 miles if it's going to take you out for 6 days to recover from it, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be smart about it. Start from where you are, even if it's not where you'd like to be, and do what you can from there.
A little asterisk on this is talking about taper time, right? Mm-hmm. When we max out at 20 miles and let's say 45 miles per week, I'm just throwing stuff out there. I'm not saying that's what you should be doing. But when we reach that type of a peak, we need a full 3 weeks. If you are starting with a more conservative long run or more conservative overall, you might actually be able to get away with a 2-week taper. If you're maxing out at, let's say you're at 12 right now, you're going to go 12, 14, 16, and then you have a 2-week taper before race day, that's actually okay. Yeah. Right? So know that because you're lower mileage, you can actually usually shorten up that taper just a little bit and not, really kind of suffer. You're going to maximize the amount of training that you have left.
And as coaches, we'll tell athletes, like, we'd rather have you a little undercooked than have you overtrained at the starting line, right? So like, benefit to you, I guess, for not being overtrained. But keep that in mind. Like, there's no use in overtraining in those last 3 weeks because your risk of injury, your risk of not getting to the starting line goes up.
Number 4, we've touched on this one, but you need to check your ego, like, for real. If you have not done the work, chances are of you having this perfect A race, this is not the race to do it in. It could it happen? Sure. Do you want to go into it thinking that it is going to happen? I wouldn't, because you're either going to hurt yourself or be sorely disappointed. So adjust your pacing. If you thought that you wanted to go for sub 4, I don't think shooting for a 9-minute average right out of the gates is a great idea. I think you should be much more progressive and conservative about that. Use strategic walking breaks. The Galloway method, Google it if you don't know what we're talking about. It works. I will tell you, I've had people in the low 3s qualify with a run walk. It's crazy. It is not sexy. Yeah. Right? People aren't posting about it. Hey, I did this run walk. However, it does work. And there's a reason that it works, and that it keeps your heart rate overall happy. It also gives your body a break during the walk, because guess what? If your mileage isn't what it should have been, this is the time to use the walk strategically, and honestly, you could feel really good. You could surprise yourself. And of course, adjust your overall goals. So if you had stuff written down at the beginning of the season, but you haven't done 50% of the training and you're on week 12, you need to take another look at it and come up with some stuff that you're not questioning.
Yeah, in terms of setting those goals, there are many different ways to measure success. We've done an episode on that. And, shifting from a time goal to a goal of having fun. Yeah. Right? Like having the race experience.
Nailing my nutrition.
Yeah.
Other aspects that you have failed at before that you can nail.
Exactly. And, the shifting from a time goal to how do I want to feel goal.
Yeah, process goal.
Process goal is a really good idea. All right. And number 5, if you really have not done the work, you might want to consider deferring. You might not want to line up if you are at risk of injury. And this is especially if you haven't been training because you've been injured. Yeah. Then you really need to put some thought into this. Like, is it worth it to do this one race and potentially further injure yourself and not be able to run for how long, or to have a longer running career and maybe do this race next year? If life has really gotten hectic and it doesn't look like it's going to get any easier before race day, like, you're not going to be able to adjust your goals, you're not going to be able to hit that consistency leading up in the time that you have left, you might want to consider postponing your race. So check the deferral policy, if you could do it to next year, but you really need to evaluate your risk of injury and also, how much fun you'll have actually doing the race. Like, do you want to show up and do this race if you're going to be miserable and pissed that you're not hitting your goals, you're not hitting your times, and you're not having a good time doing it?
2 more notes on this deferral stuff. One is that races, and you said check the policy. This is so different than it used to be, right? This is something that COVID really evolved and is an upside to the last crazy however many years we're at right now, is that they do have a lot more flexibility, even for big races, that we haven't had before. So don't let the policies of the past dictate kind of what your options are now. The second thing, it's not really related, but something that Brian said to me many, many years ago when I first opened Edge. I was actually very well trained for a 50-mile race, and my grandmother died right before the race, probably like 10 days before. And we knew it was coming, but it was really bad timing, and I was supposed to be going out with a group of people from Edge, and I was just really, really bummed, and I didn't really consider going to the race. But I was bummed, and I knew I needed to go to the funeral. And he looked at me, he said, "Robyn, there will always be other races, right? And it was such like a point. He's so good at moments like that of just like saying something and it sticks. And I was like, you know what, you're totally right, right? Mm-hmm. So, and there was, and I found a month and a half later and PR'd and had like the race of probably the best race of my life, actually. Yeah. But like that's just proof that like there really are. If things are mounting up and you need to have a pivot, there's always going to be another opportunity for you to use the fitness you are depositing.
Always, yep. And if you need that longer runway, there's always another race coming up. So to recap, life happens, and we know that. If your training hasn't looked the way that you wanted it to, you need to consider the risks and rewards of showing up at the starting line. If you think that you can pull it together, gain some consistency, and adjust your expectations, you might be able to show up to the starting line and have a good time. But if you think that life is going to continue to be busy, you might want to think about fully adjusting your goals and expectations, checking your ego to the side, using those strategic walk breaks if you show up, and or maybe consider deferring to another race because there's always another race in the future.
And remember Coach Chris's favorite new phrase, there's no cramming for a marathon or anything really long.
So if you know that you're not going to be able to be more consistent about your running, check out this video about how to be better at running without running at all.